Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Srila Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Namashreshtam manamapi shati putramatra swarupam rupam tasya gajam arupari matirim goshavatim radha kundam girivaramoho radhika mahadavasham prapto yasya pratitikapaya shri gurum dham natosmi Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevalabha Kati Sadma Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevalabha Kati Sadma
Two separate bhajans. One is Jeev Jago, the other one is
Udila Aruna.
Udila Aruna.
They're connected. Bando Mui Savadana Mate Bando mue sabadana mate. Jahara prashare bhai bhavato riyaja. Krishna prapti hoy jaha hoite. Krishna prapti hoy jaha hoite. Guru mukha padma vakya chitete koriyaikya. Anakori ho mane asha. Anakori ho mane asha. Shri Guru Charane Rati Eshe Uttama Gati. Shri Guru Charane Rati Eshe Uttama Gati. Jai prashare pure sarva asha. Jai prashade pure sarva asha. Chakudan dilo je janme janme prabhu she. Chakudan dilo je janme janme prabhu she. Divya gyan hre prakashita. Divya gyan hre prakashita. Prema bhakti jaha hoite avidya vinasha jate. Vede gai jahara charita. Vede gai jahara charita. Shri Guru Karuna Sindhu Adama Janara Bandhu. Lokana lokera jivana Lokana lokera jivana Prabhu kora doya Deha more pada chaya Ebe jashku shikti bhuvana Ebe jashku shikti bhuvana Prabhu kora doya Deho more pada chaya Prabhu kora doya Deha more pada chaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Rishatarine Namaste Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Dedicate Karakina Deya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Urilo Aruna Purabhabhagi Twijamani Gauramani Jage Bhakata Samua Loya Sate Gela Nagara Braje Tatai tatai bhajaloko Ghana gana tahe jajero Primi dhala dala sunaranga Charane nupura bhaje Mukunda Madhava Jadava Hari Bolina Bolore Vanana Bori Mukunda Madhava Hari Mukunda Madhava Jadava Hari Bolina Bolore Vanana Bore Niche nidabashe gelore rati Dibasha sharira shaje Mono dulaba manava deho Paya kikoro bhavana keho Ebena bajile jashoda shuta Charame pori belaje Urita tapana hoile asta Dina gelo hoile bohole bebhyasta Tabe kino ebe alasa hoy Nabajari doya raje Urita tapana hoile asta Work with me now. Work with me. Jivana anita jana hasa tahena na vira viparaba Namashaya kori chatane tumi taka panakaje Jivera kalyana sadanaka Jagate Asiye Madhuryanam Abidyatimira Tapana Rupe Hridgagani Biraje Krishna Nam Shurakori Apan Jura Bhakati Vinoda Pran Nambina Kichu Nahi Koro Choda Bhuvana Mahaje Jeev Jago, Jeev Jago Gaura Chandra Bole Wake up, sleeping souls. Lord Gauranga is calling. Kota Nidra Jao Maya Pisachila Kole Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama, Hare Hare. Baji Baboliya Eshe Shankshara Bhitare Bhuliya Rohile Tumi Abhijara Bhare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Tomare loite ami Huinu avatara I've descended as an avatar just to save you. Ami bina bandhu aro Keache tomara Except for me, who is your friend? Hey! Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Enechia Shauri Maya Nashibaro lagi. I brought the medicine to eradicate Maya. Harinama Mahamantra Lao Tumi Magi. Now beg for the holy name and take it. Hey, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bhakti Vinoda Prabhu Charani Poriya. Bhaktivinoda Thakur fell at the lotus feet of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Thakur Bhakti Vinoda Prabhu Charane Poriya. Thakur Bhakti. She Hari Nama Mantra Loilo Magiya. And after having begged for the holy name, he received it. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Get ready. Rama. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare Govinda Jai Jai Gopala Jai Jai Govinda Jai Jai Gopala Jai Jai Hey Radha Ramana Hare Govinda Jai Jai Radha Ramana Hare Govinda Jai Jai Govinda Jai Jai Gopala Jai Jai Govinda Jai Jai Gopala Jai Jai Radha Ramana Hare Govinda Jai Jai Radha Ramana Hare Govinda Jai Jai Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Go Premanande Shri Hari Nam Sankirtan Ki Shri Hari Nam Mantra Ki Shri Hari Nam Prabhu Ki Go Premanande Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Hari Bol Hari Bol Nitai Gaur Hari Bol Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraj Gacharya Stotaras Shri Shrimad Bhai Charana Ravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraj Gacharya Stotaras Shri Shrimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavindi Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sivasari Go Bhaktivinoda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gogopina Sham Kund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Mayapur Navadip Dham Ki Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jamuna Devi Ganga Devi Ki Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Go Premanande Haribo.
When did I see you last? So this is your main base now? Everything's going okay? Fantastic.
Hare Krishna. So for those of you that were here yesterday, right, Tamahar and I did education. So the fact I'm up here again today shows which among us works cheapest. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janabalava Girvaradari Gopi Janabalava Girvaradari Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jayo Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balava Girivardhari Gopi Jana Balava Girivardhari Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tiravanachari Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Privrajagacharya Asto Tarasatashi Shimanis Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Privrajagacharya Asto Tarasatashi Shimanis Divine Grace Shri Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrindi Ki Jai. ISKCON BBT Founder Acharya Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Shri Kishore Kishori Ki Jai. Shri Gornitai Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Baladev Sumati Subhadra Ki Jai. Chicago ISKCON Ki Jai. Vaishnav Sangha Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories, Shri Shri Guru and Garanga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Yeah, that's okay. Let's pull this over. Yeah, I'll let you know. Please repeat after me. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttame Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'm going to read from Canto 4 of the Srimad Bhagavatam, chapter 29, which is entitled Talks Between Narada and King Prachinibari. Text number 46. Yada yasyanu grinati Yada yasyanu grinati Bhagavan Atma Bhavitaha Bhagavan Atma Bhavitaha Sajahati Mating Loke Sajahati Mating Loke Vede cha parinishtitam Vede cha parinishtitam Yada yasyanu grihnati Bhagavan Atma Bhavitaha Sajahati Mating Loke Vede cha parinishtitam Yada yasyani grinati Bhagavan Atma Bhavitaha. Yeah, not so much back and forth, naturally. Vede cha parinishtitam Yada yasyanu grinati Bhagavan Atma Bhavita Sajati Loke Vede cha parinishtitam. Mataji's. Okay, so now we're not going to go through the transliteration for the so that we can save some time. Translation. When a person is fully engaged in devotional service, he is favored by the Lord, who bestows his causeless mercy. At such a time, the awakened devotee gives up all material activities and ritualistic performances mentioned in the Vedas. I'm going to read part of the purport. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. In the previous verse, those who are in knowledge have been described as unable to appreciate the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, this verse indicates that those who are followers of Vedic rituals, as well as those who are followers of fruitive activities, are unable to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In these two verses, both the karmis and jnanis are described as unfit to understand Him. As described by Srila Rupa Goswami, only when one is completely free from mental speculation and fruitive activity, anyabhilashita shunyam jnana karmadhi anavritam, can one engage in pure devotional service without being polluted by material desires. The significant word Atma Bhavita indicates that the Lord is awakened in one's mind if one constantly thinks of Him. A pure devotee is always thinking of the lotus feet of the Lord. Save manaha Krishna padar vindeha. A pure devotee cannot remain a moment without being absorbed in thoughts of the personality of Godhead. This constant thinking of the Lord is described in the Bhagavad Gita as satata yuktanam, always engaging in the Lord's service. Bhajatam priti purvakam. This is devotional service in love and affection. Prabhupada then continues. The word Atma Bhavita also indicates that a devotee is always thinking or always engaged in preaching to deliver conditioned souls. It is said of the six Goswamis, Nana Sastra Vicharnaika Nipuno Sad Dharma Samsthapako Lokanam Hitakarino. A pure devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always thinking of how fallen, conditioned souls can be delivered. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, influenced by the merciful devotee's attempt to deliver fallen souls, enlightens the people in general from within by His causeless mercy. If a devotee is blessed by another devotee, he becomes free from karma-kanda and jnana-kanda activities. As confirmed in the Brahma Samhita, Vedeshu Durlabham, the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be realized through karma-kanda and jnana-kanda. Adurlabham Atma Bhakto, the Lord is realized only by a sincere devotee. Again, I'm skipping some words, and Prabhupada says, the sincere devotee is always helped by the Supersoul who resides within the heart of every living entity, as Lord Krishna confirms in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, text 10. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upyantite. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. This is the stage of becoming free from the contamination of the material world. At such a time, a devotee makes friends with another devotee, and his engagement in material activities ceases completely. At that time, he attains the favor of the Lord and loses his faith in material civilization, which begins with Varnashrama Dharma. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu speaks clearly of one's becoming liberated from the Varnashram Dharma, the most exalted system of human civilization. At such a time, one feels himself to be perfectly the servant of Lord Krishna, a position taken by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. Naham vipro nacha narapatir, na piveshyo na shudro, naham varni nacha grihapatir, no vanoshto itirva, kintu prodya nikhila paramananda purnam tabdher, gopi bhartu padakamalayur, dasa anudasa. Padyavali 63. Quote, I am not a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra. I am not a Brahmachari, Grihastha, vanaprastha, or sannyasi. What am I? I am the eternal servant of the servants of Lord Krishna. Through the disciplic succession, one can attain this conclusion, which is perfect elevation to the transcendental platform. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Jana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmei Shri Gurave Namaha. So I thought this verse is very appropriate because today's discussion is about Varnashrama, ISKCON, and the GBC. So this is a pretty extensive and heavy topic, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of lively discussion today. So I don't want to take much of our time in terms of introducing the subject, except that we have to do some justice to introduce the subject, and then the discussion will bring about the depth of this topic, because there's so many persons here, all of you, who are very intelligent, have very great ideas. You have your concerns and doubts, and you have your opportunities in your hearts that you're thinking of, and the challenges that will actually churn the ocean of this topic. I thought at this time, if we can bring up the chart. Srila Prabhupada taught us that we have to be faithful to the teachings of the Acharyas. And he had a very specific purpose for his advent in this world. When he came to this world, he had a very specific purpose. His brand was a very specific brand of Krishna consciousness. In the Nectar of Devotion, Nectar of Instruction, Srila Prabhupada, in the introduction part and forward, says that the purpose of the Hare Krishna movement is so that we can engage in, or we can once again enter the conjugal pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Now, this is such an exalted subject, it's not very prudent or advisable or even easy to talk about this subject, except that Srila Prabhupada made the process very simple for us. And in understanding that process, it answers the questions of Varnashram. And as we see the chart, I will explain this point. This is a chart that I use. Was the chart up? Oh, it's not up here. How will people see the chart? That was the idea. Okay. Will it take very long? Because then I can. People online can see the chart. Okay. Okay. All right. So when Srila Prabhupada came to the West and preached in the West, and to preach all over the world, he introduced the science of Krishna consciousness in a particular way. In that particular way, his interest was that we will all become Vaishnavas. We will all become very sincere Vaishnavas and very sincere devotees and followers of Gauranga Mahaprabhu, and actually promote that brand of Gauranga Mahaprabhu. Now, as we know, Gauranga Mahaprabhu's most important instructions were Prithvi Ache Yata Nagaradigram Sarvatra Pachar Huebe Moranam, that he wanted that his name be glorified all over the world, be sung all over the world, in every town and village. And his other important instruction that he gave many important instructions, but these are considered his most, was Amara Agyaya Guru Hanatara Idesh Yaritake Tarikaha Krishna Upadesh. So this is what he wanted us to do. He wanted to train us as preachers, and he many times actually brought out this point that we are a preaching movement. The purpose is actually to preach. And so to set up a preaching movement, he set up the organization of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, so that we would have a sangha of devotees that would actually promote Krishna consciousness according to the brand that he came to promote, which is actually organized by his spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Thakur. In essence, his preaching was, his teaching was, that we have to become unalloyed, unflinching devotees, and that we have to become guileless devotees. These are three very important words I want you to meditate on. Unflinching, unalloyed, and guileless as devotees. Now, these are very, very difficult standards to rise to. They're very difficult standards to rise to. And we see that over a time, as Srila Prabhupada was preaching, he came to a conclusion that actually some of his disciples and pretty much most of the public would not be able to rise to these standards so easily. So he spoke about introducing varnashrama so that people can rise through the levels of consciousness, and that was the chart that I was hoping that we would have up here. Now, I'm going to tell you about this chart anyway, and then as it comes up, it'll become clearer, because when you see it, it becomes a lot clearer. This chart I use when I speak about leadership, because I do leadership seminars, particularly for non-devotees, because that is my way of introducing Krishna consciousness to them, because we have to bring them up in their consciousness. In the Uddhava Gita, Krishna gives this advice that when we preach, the first thing is to bring people to the mode of goodness. Because when you bring them to the mode of goodness, now they will be able to understand topics of self-realization. And when they understand topics of self-realization, we can bring them to the full esoteric truth of Krishna consciousness. So it's like a step-by-step process. So basically, consciousness rises through 9 different levels, starting from the sense objects to number 2, the senses, then higher than that to number 3, which is the mind, and then higher than that to the intelligence. And these 4 are all material levels. And then it rises to its own level, the consciousness, which is like the transfer level. Then it goes to the transcendental level above that, which starts with the soul, consciousness, the level of the soul, and then to the 3 origins, Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan, the Supreme Absolute Truth, which is the 9th level, the highest level of consciousness. So when the chart comes up, you will see that basically the first 4 levels deal with material life. And in material life, the key aspects of material life are piety, intelligence, and nobility. Prabhupada describes this. Now, if some of you are looking for references to my statements, I do have the references. I actually have a whole wad of paper that has the references and everything. I can give that to you, and you can look up the writings there and go further into the references. But Prabhupada speaks about this, that for material life, if you really want to become a great materialist, these are the 3 things that you'd be into: piety, intelligence, and nobility. That will drive material life to its fullest extent. Now, it's actually the devotees who have these answers. The materialists think that they have the answers, but actually it is the devotees who have the answers, because the answers come from Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra. And that was Prabhupada's teachings, that we should do things according to Krishna's pleasure. And how do we know what pleases Krishna? We know that by reference to Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra. Then there are people who are going to become interested in spiritual life. To become interested in spiritual life, they're going to be into the intelligence, they'll be into consciousness itself, they'll be into the soul in terms of Atma Gyan, and they will also have some understanding of Brahman, of Brahminical knowledge. And these persons are called spiritualists. They're into spiritual life. For them, 3 things will be very important. For them, sacrifice, austerity, and charity will be very important. These 3 things will become their driving factors. Then come the transcendentalists, and that is Prabhupada's movement. This movement is meant to be a transcendental movement. For the transcendentalists, the 4 things that they're into is the soul, the all-pervasive energy of the Lord, meaning the effulgence emanating from the body of the Lord, Paramatma, and then for us in Hare Krishna, for ISKCON, it is about the Supreme Absolute Truth. So we're a particular brand even amongst the transcendentalists. And for the transcendentalists, there are 5 activities. Those 5 activities are association with devotees, reading Srila Prabhupada's books, I'm paraphrasing here, chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, meaning doing chanting, singing of the Maha Mantra, worshipping the deity, also having a devotional diet and dancing while you're doing kirtan, These are very essential parts of our program. And finally, living in the right environment, which means living with devotees, living in a holy place. And I've sort of like added a little bit in there, which is that for us, because we are a preaching movement, we encourage others to do these same 5 things, A, B, C, D, and E. A standing for association, B for books, C for chanting, D for deities, devotional diet, dancing, and E for the environment that we're in, or encouraging others to do the same. So these are the activities of the transcendentalists. In our brand, there's a particular way of doing these 5 things. So this was what Srila Prabhupada came to introduce. And so for us, Varnashrama really means to follow the instruction of the spiritual master, that the spiritual master will know the nature of the disciple and train the disciple to become a spiritual master according to the nature of the disciple, which is chapter 3 of the Bhagavad Gita, by the way. It's the as it is chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that explains from what position are we supposed to find Krishna, how are we supposed to see things as they are or as it is. And actually from that point, we springboard into this arrangement that Srila Prabhupada made, that we can actually practice Krishna consciousness and spread Krishna consciousness, preach it to others in a particular way. So, but at the same time, as we know, these lower levels of consciousness are important, just as when you go to school, kindergarten is important. Elementary school is important. It's not like that now I'm in a PhD program, therefore elementary school and kindergarten and all these lower levels of education, high school, etc., are all unimportant. They're not unimportant. People do rise through these levels of consciousness. So we do know that most people are going to be in the first 4 levels of consciousness. They're going to be about sense objects, their iPad, iPhone, Samsung Galaxy Note 3 and Note 4, and all the things that are the gizmos of this world. They're going to be about their senses. It's all about me. What's in it for me? It's about their mind, and it's about what little intelligence they have. They don't have much intelligence because, this is Kali Yuga, Manda Sumanda Matayo. But anyway, whatever little intelligence they have, that's what they're into. Now, for them, the Varnashram system lifts them to the level of spirituality. Actually, the Varnashram system is a material system. Prabhupada very clearly describes it is a material program. Its purpose is actually to lift people to the spiritual level. And then when they come in association with spiritualists, they can actually come to meet the devotees of Gauranga Mahaprabhu, the devotees of Krishna who can lift them to the transcendental level. So they bring them through these levels like that. Not going to happen? Oh, it's my computer? Sorry? Oh, that's my computer. Oh, okay. Oh, well. Okay, just one minute.
When you offend the gizmos in a Bhagavatam class, you get instant karma back.
Okay. So, actually, well, I wasn't offending. I was just saying that it's at that level. Yeah, it's going to shoot up there. So I actually appreciate the gizmos. Okay, and that's one thing. The point is that you can't ignore, we can't say we're not interested in our children because they're into kindergarten and elementary school and high school. No, we're most interested in them. We're most interested in the materialists. Why we're most interested is because they're going to, it's Krishna's instruction. It is his instruction that we should raise them to the level of spiritual life and raise them to the level of transcendental life. And you cannot raise them without understanding their nature. If you don't understand their nature, how are you going to connect with them? You won't be able to connect with them, and then what will happen is there'll be frustration, and there'll be more of, we're devotees and you're karmis. It's us and them. And they think that we're crazy, we think they're crazy, and welcome to the material world. And all we did was followed a material formula by doing that. That is not our formula. Our formula is to understand that Jivera Swarupa Hoy, Nityera Krishnera Das. That everyone, every living entity is actually servant of Krishna. So here we can see the brackets, the first 4 levels, the middle is the spiritual level, which comes from intelligence to Brahman, and then the transcendental level that goes from the soul up to the supreme absolute truth. Now it's actually much more complicated than that. When I do it, I actually call this the portal. If any of you have seen Stargate on TV, You know this thing about the portal, which is if you go past the portal, the life on the other side is very different from life on this side. So in the same way, life before we transcend this, to go to the ninth level of consciousness is very different from once you've passed the ninth level of consciousness, when you've reached the ninth level of consciousness. Life is very different. And that's why, as devotees, most of us will never become non-devotees again. Because we've tasted something in this lifestyle that is so different and so ecstatic that we can't live without that taste anymore now. We've tasted the best. And now, whatever little taste we've got, just like Visheshika Prabhu was saying yesterday, even if you've got at our meeting upstairs, even if you've got a mustard seed of Krishna consciousness, a mustard seed of this taste, that mustard seed can bring about a whole ocean of Krishna consciousness and bliss like that. So the idea is, one is that we should understand that those lower levels are important, and there we are promoting piety, intelligence, and nobility, but based on Krishna consciousness. Link it to the ninth level, link it to the supreme, because that's our brand. Our brand is at the ninth level, by the way. Because the transcendental level starts from level 6 through 9, but our brand is at the ninth level. It's totally into everything about Krishna. Always think of Krishna, never forget Krishna, always try to please Krishna, never displease Krishna. It's like Krishna, 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 that Gauranga Mahaprabhu actually gave us. So we're at the ninth level. And so that's one thing that we should do to actually bring them. The second is that the ninth level, like each level actually contains in it the levels below it. So the ninth level has all the levels below it. So when you do ninth level activities, automatically the first section, which is the material section, will become enhanced. And what do we see now? We see that devotees are becoming so wealthy. My personal prediction is in 20 years, the devotees will be wealthier than the karmis. Actually, the devotee community will be wealthier. Because what will happen is that all their piety that's kicking in with this great Krishna conscious activity, automatically bhukti and mukti will be there, folding their hands and saying, may we serve you. And the trap is that a lot of us are going to fall in that trap. A lot of us are going to think, well, bhukti and mukti is really great. It feels very nice, because it's a lot better than material life when it's full of miseries. But we can't fall in that trap, because that is the trap that's available to us because we've started now engaging at the ninth level of consciousness. So our understanding, we know that the ninth level can help all these levels. So really for us, Varnashrama, even though at some time in the future Varnashrama will be introduced, how it is a material system, you will see that ISKCON will introduce it. Why it will introduce it is because there'll be so many devotees who become so intelligent, they'll know how to introduce it so that it's totally linked to the ninth level. It's connected, and that is the process of yoga. Yoga means to connect all these levels of consciousness to the ninth level. For us, that is Bhakti Yoga. That is Gaudiya Vaishnava Yoga. For us, to do that is our yoga. So we will know how to do that, but at the present time, we don't know how to do it. And we don't want to introduce a material system that will distract us from the ninth level activities. So my suggestion for today's program is, as far as Varnashrama is concerned, is please stick with the basics that Srila Prabhupada gave us, because if we stick with these basics, the core activities of chanting, feasting, dancing, distributing Srila Prabhupada's books, worshipping the deity, associating with the devotees, living in holy places, meaning the Sangha of devotees, these will transport us to the ninth level. And that will give us the intelligence of how to introduce Varnashrama so that the first four-level personalities, who are going to be the majority of this world, can now come to spiritual life and ultimately transcendental life and ultimately full-on Krishna consciousness as Srila Prabhupada wanted us to have. This way we'll connect everybody properly. But if we do it prematurely, what will happen is what is happening now. Sometimes we attempt some things as GBCs and as leaders, and when we fail, people lose faith in the GBC. They lose faith in the leaders. So the GBC leaders right now should, as I see it, they are doing this. They're promoting these core activities more and more through the intelligent methods that we're using now with strategic planning, this, that, and the other, organizational development. This is actually our right path. We're actually on the right path. The difficulty is that the mind will tell us, no, you're not on the right path, because the mind wants us to fail. Why does the mind want us to fail? You can see it's level 3, it's in the material element. It wants us to stay in the material world. If we leave the material world, the mind is going to miss us. We're going to lose our company. the best friend it had for all these lifetimes, millions of lifetimes, it's going to lose it. So it's going to tell you, no, 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 Prabhu, you're not doing well. You don't attend Mangalarti. You're not a pure devotee. You're not a nice devotee. Oh, so what if you chant 16 rounds a day and follow the 4 regulated principles? What's the big deal about that? That only takes 2 hours. What about the other 22 hours of sinfulness that you're living? You're not a devotee. And worse than that, we actually do this to other devotees. And what do? We drag everybody down. But actually, truth be told, ISKCON is developing so well that it is incredible. Its rate of success is incredible. And I'll give one statement and I'll finish here. The leader of the Methodist Church, and if you know the Methodist Church, it's a very organized church, they're very brilliant, said at his inauguration when he became the chairman of the Methodist group, as the incoming chairman, in his speech, he said, watch out for those Hare Krishnas. What we achieved in 1700 years, they've already achieved in 30 years. Don't blink, because they'll go right past you and you won't even know they've gone past you. This was in 1995. He made this statement. So, now, this is an independent person. This person has nothing to do with Hare Krishna movement. I don't think his interest was to promote the Hare Krishna movement. I don't think his interest was to give us a plug. But he gave us the biggest plug that we actually all never heard and never took account of. The fact that we are successful, the idea is to become more successful. Even the gopis in the spiritual world feel that we're not doing enough. We need to do a lot more. So we need to do that, but not beat up on ourselves to the extent that we start fighting one another and discouraging one another and taking positive energy and investing it in a negative arena. Let's not do that. Let's stay positive. And we will do everything that's going to happen. In fact, it'll happen so quickly, we'll be wondering what happened. That's what will happen. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So, I'm going to look at this from a slightly different perspective. We all look at things from our different viewpoints, so my take is a little bit going to be focusing on this concept of Vanashram, and particularly looking at it from a communications perspective, or at least that's the way that orients my thinking.
Turn this off so it doesn't distract everybody.
I wasn't sure which verse. Nityananda Prabhu selected the verse, and we didn't get a chance to connect this morning, so I wasn't sure which verse he was going to choose touching on Vanashram, whether it would be this one, which was very good choice, about how Lord Chaitanya transcended Vanashram and how the essence of it is the concept Daivi Vanashram, how to do everything for Krishna, and this is what Nityananda Prabhu has emphasized. We also know there's many other verses where Prabhupada speaks a little more simple, perhaps, and just talks about how human life begins when there's Vanashram. And you don't have human life until you have Vanashram. And it's become, for some in our movement, it's become a particularly important instruction, or one that they kind of grab hold of and advocate that if we don't do this first and foremost, if we don't put more emphasis into this, then we really won't be successful. There's one or two references out there. I don't think it's written anywhere, but maybe someone can correct me that, Prabhupada said half my work hasn't been done because Vanashram hasn't been put in place, like that. I personally had an experience years ago. I was visiting a temple, I think it was during one of our North American meetings, and there was a seminar. One quite senior devotee said he wanted to do an experiment with everybody. He wanted to do some research, so he passed out a little quiz for everyone. There's about maybe 20 questions. Some of you may remember this. It was quite a while ago. And the questions were, I remember one of them in particular, which gives a sense of the whole taste of his research. One of the questions was, you're at a temple and a group of visitors come. What would you prefer to do? 1, give a class to them. 2, organize their visit. 3, give a donation to cover the costs of the prasadam. Or 4, clean up after they leave. This was the scholarly research paper that was presented to us. And I remember having a very visceral reaction to having to fill this out. And, where are we going with this? And that's the one question I remember. There was several along the same lines, so I kind of filled it out like begrudgingly, okay, I'll go along to honor this Prabhu. The papers were handed in, and he took them all and came back at the end of the day with the report. And report, basically, he kind of, was doing this as evidence to show that this 4 gradations of people exist everywhere in society, and we shouldn't hide from it. We all have our natural tendencies. And I think that's what he wanted to come back with. But what he came back with was, on the basis of what you've all filled out, it goes to prove that in this age people are really confused about their varna. In other words, people didn't fall into the neat 4 categories that he had anticipated, so that proves that we're all a little confused and messed up. So, for me, that's become kind of a pivotal experience in my Krishna consciousness, because I think this is as I'll talk about it, it's a subject that we need to be a little cautious about. There are a lot of quotes from Srila Prabhupada about the importance of an ashram and how human life begins with it, but I think we need to be careful, and I think sometimes members of our community are not very careful about asking, well, what's the essence of that? What did Prabhupada mean by that? When he says, Varnashram is important, what parts of Varnashram are important? What do we apply about it? What maybe don't we apply? What works and what doesn't work, or what would work and what doesn't work? And we know that Prabhupada, as our founder Acharya, in his preaching and in his 11 or 12 years of establishing Krishna consciousness in the West, he demonstrated time and time again this core principle that he taught of time, place, and circumstance. Prabhupada, in everything he did, he showed us what it means, how to apply the different aspects of Krishna consciousness, and how to adjust those things. We know he said that many times that his only qualification is his following his spiritual master, and many times that my only qualification, I didn't change anything. But Prabhupada adjusted a lot of things. He didn't change anything. He didn't change the core principles, but he adjusted a lot of things according to time, place, and circumstance. Prabhupada had women live in the temples. That's not a very common thing in India. Even today, it's not a very common thing, and Prabhupada did that. He adjusted the number of rounds we chant. He adjusted that it's okay to wear Western dress to go out and preach. And that when he went back and forth, there was some discussion. He got letters from some devotees that said, your disciples are taking on Western dress again. This is a big problem. It's going to bring down the movement. And Prabhupada said, stop it. Someone else wrote to him and said, no, they're wearing gentleman's dress to distribute your books. Here's the scores. And he said, okay, it's all right. So, he adjusted, even even he himself adjusted back and forth a couple times with that ultimate purpose of what's going to work to establish Krishna consciousness, to spread Krishna consciousness, and also to help people practicing Krishna consciousness maintain their strictness. If it brings us down, well, we've crossed the line. If it's something we can engage in Krishna service and not be affected, as Nityananda was demonstrating here, how we have to be careful how we're affected by material energy, then those questions need to be asked. As far as an ashram, it's interesting to see, as far as the Varna part, we don't have many, if any, examples of Prabhupada putting that part of the formula in place. We really can't see how did he adjust it, what did he do, what did he apply, what didn't he apply. I don't think there's any community in all of ISKCON where Prabhupada went and said, okay, this is the Varna community and we're going to put this all in place. Or Prabhupada meant, we don't have that to look at. Just as far as the facts of what Prabhupada's practical application of the teachings, we don't have that. He did put all the ashrams in place. It's interesting. The ashrams are there from the very beginning. He made brahmacharis very early on. He made sannyasis. Grihastas were there, and there wasn't many people at that stage of life, but certainly vanaprastha is something that's kind of a simple extension of that. So he showed us when he put ashrams in place, he very clearly demonstrated the essence of ashrams is what? Nityananda's point. What's the essence of ashrams? Do it for Krishna. Doesn't matter. In the quote from Lord Chaitanya, I'm not a Brahmin, I'm not a Vaishya, I'm not a Sudra, I'm not a Grahasta, etc. I'm servant of the servant of the servant. So that principle he clearly showed us in practice. In principle, in teaching, and also in practice, that everything you do, whatever your ashram is, you should dovetail for Krishna. And he adjusted things within the ashrams. Brahmacharini. That's an adjustment. That's quite a significant adjustment, isn't it? And in many practical ways, like we know, according to the Shastra, according to the teachings, divorce not allowed. Simply not allowed. And people got divorced, and Prabhupada said, okay, continue with your service. Absolutely not allowed, but okay, if you have to, you allow it. And I mean, there's verses I remember as a brahmachari. I haven't read this verse in a while, but I think it's right in the Bhagavatam purport, maybe somewhere else. One who gives up sannyas, Prabhupada wrote, and I think he's translating for some text or previous acharya, to give up sannyas is described like eating your own vomit. Well, that's a pretty graphic instruction, And when sannyasis gave up sannyas, Prabhupada said, okay, just don't give up Krishna. So he adjusted. So very high principle, but he adjusted. Very strict standard, but he adjusted. And we have those examples with ashram, and he put it in place, and we have that to learn from. Now the Varna side is a little more complex, and I think problematic. If we understand that to mean, as today's purport and as Nityananda was highlighting, whatever you do, do it for Krishna. If you're a plumber, plumb for Krishna. If you're a singer, sing for Krishna. If you're an accountant, count for Krishna. If you're a musician, do music for Krishna. If you're a mom, do motherhood for Krishna. Okay, that's clear, and I mean, it's certainly very profound and highest aspects of our philosophy, but in one sense it's also rather simple and clear. To understand what the goal is. The application is a little complicated because of our conditioning, as Nityananda was pointing out. But what it means is quite clear, and we have the example, right in the Bhagavad Gita, our foundational text. Arjuna is a warrior, and his whole turmoil is, what do I do? And Krishna says, you do what you do for me. And there's a beautiful, at least one purport, I think possibly two purports in Bhagavad Gita, where Prabhupada gives the example of a factory worker. And he says, if a factory worker does his job thinking of Krishna, that's pure devotional service. He uses that expression. So, I worked in a factory one summer when I was paying my way through college, and I was definitely not in pure Krishna consciousness at that factory, and that's a pretty tough place to spiritualize. But Prabhupada gives, there's the example in the Gita. You can do it in a battlefield, and you can do it in a factory, and of course we know the instructions to Srila Prabhupada and all the acharyas are there doing in every function of life. So doing all that we do for the Lord, and as today's verse talked, Prabhupada mentioned, Lord Chaitanya transcended the Varna and ashram and said, I'm none of these things, I'm purely a servant to the Lord. So clearly, the essence is, as Nityananda was emphasizing, how do we do whatever we do for the Lord? And as preachers, that's certainly the essence of what we tell people. If you're a student, dedicated to Krishna. I'll give a very mundane example. I was a brahmachari for 10 years, and then I got married, and my wife had been married before, and had an 8-year-old son came into the family. So when you're grahasta, you have to learn new duties and perform new sacrifices. When you're brahmachari, you do things like drive around the world, drive around the country in the back of a van with 18 other men, and sleep in tiny spaces and break buckets of ice in the morning to take baths and things like that. As a grahasta, you perform other austerities like bowling and baseball and things like that. It's a different set of rules and yagyas to perform. So I remember having the experience when I took my 8-year-old son bowling for the first time. And I hadn't bowled since I was a 14-year-old, and I remember I wasn't particularly good at it, but I have some sense of numbers. I think I would, my best game was maybe 130 or something like that, and 150, not very good. But I remember standing in the bowling alley thinking, Krishna, how am I? Well, I kind of got over how to get here, but that was. I'd come to grips with my dharma for this stage of life. But how did I get in? What do I do now that I'm here? Was my question. I mean, I really had that question. How do you bowl for Krishna? I mean, Arjuna shot arrows. How do you bowl? Yeah. Yeah, I was more covered over. It wasn't that clear. Hari Bol. This is why we need sannyasis and spiritual leaders in our movement to give us those directions. But I remember thinking, what am I supposed to? I mean, how do I just write this off to materialistic activity, or because I got to throw the ball. I can't just say, okay, you do it. I got to participate. And I thought, okay, I'll do it for Krishna. Krishna, I'm going to knock these pins down for you. Because I didn't know what else to do. I thought, all right, I've got to throw the ball, so, I'll do it for you. And this is a true story. I wish I'd saved the paper, the historical proof. This was back in the days they still wrote it on paper. Now I think they put it up on the screen. I'm pretty sure we had a paper. So any of you that know bowling, if you hit them all down the first time, it's called a strike. If it takes 2 turns to hit them all, it's called a spare, and there's different ways of scoring. And the more strikes you get, you do really well. And the highest you can hit is 300. That's a perfect game. I never broken like 150, maybe 160 once in my life. And I hadn't done this for 15 years. So first throw, Krishna, this is for you. Strike. All right, Krishna, second throw. This, my 8-year-old gutter ball. And I'm thinking, okay, he's trying to encourage him a little bit. I'm going to do it for Krishna. And I at the end, I had 216 was the number. 20% higher than I ever got. I thought, I don't know if you can read into that too much, and I'm not encouraging devotees to become bowling professionals. But for me, it was kind of I think this is kind of a little bit what it means. Whatever you have to do, somehow, try to do it for Krishna. And I think, as preachers, people come to us and they're students and they're studying concert piano. We had a man in Denver years ago who came, he was a concert pianist, and I think back, we really didn't know what to say to this guy. We should have said, become a famous concert pianist and do it following the principles, and you'll have an even more strength, and introduce Krishna consciousness whenever you can, and if you become famous, to whatever degree you become famous, tell your friends about Krishna and draw inspiration from Krishna. And as I remember, we weren't quite so broad-minded in those days, and we said, well, your name's Bhakta Phil, and you do what every Bhakta does. You got to wash pots, Take your $1 million hands and wash pots, and be careful, because, we try to teach people, but we can't guarantee there's no knives through that soapy water. But, do the best you can. And we just, there wasn't a lot of vision for being a concert pianist for Krishna. I think these days, there's much better. So that idea of, dovetailing, if you're a plumber, that's fantastic. We need plumbers, right? If you travel around ISKCON, we need plumbers. We definitely need plumbers. There's a list of temples I can send them to right now, I know the showers where, the hot water doesn't come on and the toilet drips all day long, and et cetera. We need plumbers, and, we need everything. We need school teachers. We talked about education yesterday. We desperately need teachers. We need managers. We talked about leadership training. We need managers. We need people with MBAs that are Krishna conscious, and we need people that are business people. We need farmers. We got farms with no farmers, isn't it? We really need, we for 50 years we've been taking, as they say, city boys and put them in the country and saying, somehow make it work. So we need all these different aspects. Certainly we need intelligent people, teachers, Brahmins, etc. So that's fine, and that's clear, that's easy. The trouble starts with the Varna side, because there's this tendency to categorize people. That's the historical problem, that's the modern problem, that's the philosophical problem. Just like this little story I said in Alachua, this is what kind of got my blood boiling. Fill out these simple questions. Okay, you want to clean the room, and you want to give the class. Well, you want to give the class, you're a Brahmin. We'll put you in that. Okay, you're Brahmin. You want to clean up? Okay, you're this. You wanted to make the money? You do that. And frankly, if we look, even the example of our founder, Acharya, Prabhupada the Vaishya, he spent most of his Grihastha life working, making money. So is he a Vaishya? When he went to New York and first started teaching to the young disciples, they didn't know what the etiquette was. So, Prabhupada cut the vegetables. That's one sense Brahmin. The other sense, you get help with that. It's the working kind of a thing. Prabhupada did the shopping. Prabhupada, had to clean up after the wedding. So is he a Sudra because he's cleaning up after the wedding? Or is he showing us, as Nityananda's pointed out, the essence for Vaishnavas is there's no distinction. I clean for Krishna, I preach for Krishna, I make money for Krishna, if I have to, I bowl with my kids for Krishna. We do it all for Krishna. But again, the problem is, and I the topic was given to us, and why we have to be so careful about it, because historically, the system of Varnashram, we shouldn't be not aware of it. Varnashram became caste became, you're stuck. You're in a certain caste. And we live in Kali Yuga. I live in Washington, D.C., and I just took a friend, was visiting, and, toured the city a little bit, and, there's, read, the history of Lincoln and the history of our own country, we are the owners, you are the property. Whoa. The history of, abuse of women, the men, we are the owners, you are the property. Whoa. Etc. I read an article a few years ago, National Geographic magazine. They said that they estimate today there's 20, if I remember correctly, I think it was higher than this now. Conservative estimate, 25 million people enslaved in the world today. Human trafficking, prostitution rings, stealing people's visas, parents in Southeast Asia and other places selling their children into prostitution. And, these are all the types of perversions that come about in the modern human mind. I'm on top, you're on the bottom. Those things go on. Now, what's the connection with Varnashram? Well, absolutely none, except there's this dark tendency for exploitation and putting people in very strict hierarchies. And that's what actually became of Varnashram and the caste system. And therefore, the modern world, people are very, very wary of it. And even today in India, we're from India, that's our home base. And we know that, we frankly have to understand, we kind of have two roots, I think, modern roots in the 20th century in ISKCON. And both of them have their pluses and their advantages. Our one root is Indian culture, our other root is kind of hippie culture. Really, in terms of the West, most of the young leaders came out of some variety of 60s and 70s culture, and some of it was really great. Looking for higher spirituality, being to one degree or the other renounced, being able to live very simply, etc. But some of the stuff we brought with us was pretty bad. And same thing, modern India, some of the things are reflective of Vedic culture, Vaishnava culture, and some of it's not at all, and it's pretty bad. And I can remember first time going to Vrindavan and visiting some of the temples, and thinking, wow, is this the standard? You ducking from the bats and running from the rats and moving your way literally through the cobwebs. If you remember those old days going on parikrams, it was like, whoa, this isn't what we're supposed to do. So what do we take from this? That's the question. What do we take from it? What works from this temple experience? What works from the history experience? And we know if you mention caste, which is what they understand around the world, it's a big question. Why? Becomes a source of exploitation, prevents people from being upwardly mobile, it's a source of discrimination, totally opposed modern concepts of egalitarianism, and most of the 20th century, a lot of it, the good part of it, was trying to overcome. So, if it's done right in a Varnashram context, everyone in every aspect of society, all the different needs of society are addressed. You've got people that are driving trucks and doing plumbing and building buildings and building businesses and creating capital and creating jobs for people and managing, and political leaders with good character that are leading, and intelligent classes of people that are teaching and setting examples and caring for people. You have that. So you've got all those functions that are necessary for material society. They're all there. Two, if Varnashram is right, each of those sections is respected. Each of those is respected. And I've heard some ISKCON devotees that have some experience in India talking about that's the essence of it in the pure sense when it's done right. I think actually Radhika Raman Prabhu, who was a professor of religious studies, was explaining that's how he tells people that it's a respect for those different aspects. There's respect for a farmer, because you know how necessary they are. There's a respect. It's not that the guy that cleans, say the plumber or the cleaner, it's not that you're a lower class person, but you're respected, because we can't, if there's nobody fixes the toilet, society, pardon the pun, comes to a halt or a stop. if you don't keep the toilets running, if you don't drive the buses, if you don't have all the different society, all the different needs are there. But, so if it's done right, that's the thing. If it's done right, people have a choice. You know, I aspire to do this. Well, great, go for it. Be a teacher. Your father was a farmer, your father was a worker, but you want to be a teacher, go for it. And of course, we have so many examples of that in modern time. Everybody has a full opportunity. And the ultimate thing, Varnashram, everyone's taught how to do it for God. And it doesn't matter what your status is. If you do it with devotion, Prabhupada said a factory worker, their meditation is for God, their pure devotional service. And then he talked about charlatan meditators in the same books and the same purports. You may claim to be a yogi, you may claim to be a Brahmin, you may claim to be a teacher. Prabhupada said you're a charlatan if you don't do it for Krishna. So if it's done right, wonderful. If it's not done right, it can, you know, if we're advocating this type of discussion, Varnashram, if we don't think about it carefully, take our time, it could hurt ISKCON, and frankly, as we've seen, it can hurt the world. We don't need to be hurting the world, we need to be helping the world. So I think the essence of my comments are, let's look very carefully about what Prabhupada did put in place, what he didn't put in place, and ask a lot of questions, and not just jump in and think we prematurely understand how to fix something that's been broken. This aspect of Vedic society has been broken for a long time. So let's be a little careful about how to fix it, especially when we understand, Prabhupada said again and again and again, it's not the goal. It's a tool, but it's not the goal. So words of caution would be my take on the topic. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Rompad Maharaj and then Badrinath Maharaj.
I'm asking this question on behalf of Bhakta Luke because this topic was a topic that he suggested that we discuss.
Oh.
And the particular question that Bhakta Luke had has not been touched on yet, which is fine because it's a big topic. But the topic is basically, in relation to the GBC, you know, the classic question that comes up from time to time. The GBC is apparently an administrative group. And should the administrative group, GBC, acknowledge their place in Varnashram system and their administrative group, and they should place above them a Brahminical group
I'll go first.
and receive guidance from the Brahminical group and then do the administrative function according to the Brahminical guidance that they receive. Or should we have another model, and if we're going to move in the direction of, you know, this other half of what Prabhupada didn't complete, should we begin thinking along the line of that? Now, what Nityananda Prabhu said perhaps is the answer for the time being to that question. We will understand better as we become closer to Krishna conscious than we are today. And the illumination of how to do that other half of what Prabhupada said he wanted us to do will become clearer. Until then, we're on the right track. So maybe that's the answer. But in honor of Dr. Luke's bringing this topic up, I wanted to frame the question. He wants to add?
Yeah, you want to add to that, Luke? Please.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj, for bringing this point up. It is something that is a present interest of mine, like how it would be best to organize the society. Definitely I don't have any answers, but as an aspiring member of the society, I look forward to its development. My question was largely inspired by a historical, situation with Tamal Krishna Maharaj. He wanted to take sannyas. This is, forgive me, my details are quite blurry, but in general, Tamal Krishna Maharaj wanted to take sannyas, so Prabhupada was very happy that he would be able to preach and do all of that, so he relieved him of his administrative duties with the GBC. But then, when that left India without someone as competent as someone like Tamal Krishna Maharaj, And Prabhupada realized presently there was a need to have sannyasis on the GBC because there were not sufficient householders who were able to do that service as effectively. So it seemed to me from this point, this exchange, that Srila Prabhupada's desire was that the sannyasis would have time to devote themselves exclusively, or at least primarily, to traveling, preaching, teaching, inspiring the devotees, and the administrative work could be taken up by persons with that specialization. So that was the considerations behind the question. So yeah, I'd be very happy to hear your thoughts on that. Thank you very much.
One thing, this is something that a lot of devotees would have some thoughts on. We happen to just be the two sitting up here, so thank you for your deep question. I was about to say, depending where you ended your comments, Prabhupada said, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, you have to stop preaching as a sannyasi because of the necessity. You have to go out and you have to stop managing and function as GBC, but because it needs to be done, therefore you should go out and do it. I was going to kind of say, thanks for answering your own question with the example. If you're looking long-term way down the road, because one thing too that's a little confused, you're talking sannyasis and others, which would generally mean grihastas, but then also we're talking brahmanas and kshatriyas. The two are kind of merging together, and I think have to be looked at separately. Just my thoughts are Prabhupada also sat on the GBC and voted as a GBC member. So when I always say, okay, now Prabhupada's a kshatriya because he's doing management, or Prabhupada shouldn't have done that because he's a sannyasi, or Prabhupada only did it because it was emergency, short-term. Again, I think it's very good questions, and we hear it. A lot of people raise these same questions. I would just say we have to be very, very careful. I think that we do want to have, because even you look at, Prabhupada said, the ultimate managing authority. In a sense, that's a paradox. Because management, from a, Varnashram, Vedic, management's not the authority. Spirituality is authority, and then you manage it. But he said the managing authority. Now you could say, well, they're only supposed to have authority over management, but I don't think a lot of people advocate that. But then you say they're supposed to be the manager of all things in ISKCON. So they're supposed to be, I would just take from that, they're supposed to be the managers and the authority, which is kind of what it's trying to do now. Now the GBC is trying to develop more evolved systems and this and that. But I think we have to be a little careful. Some people do get a little, I think, simplistic. They should all be brahmanas and just give guidance. They should all be managers and etc. Or it can't work because it's mixed. I think it's not so simplistic. And I know your question isn't. It's an important question, but a lot more has to be discussed and looked at.
So what Srila Prabhupada, from my point of view, Srila Prabhupada was the most brilliant organizer ever. One thing in organization is to understand what level are we organizing from mode of goodness, mode of passion, where we at. Prabhupada was in Shuddha Sattva, he was in pure goodness. Organizations take a while to develop. If you can imagine something going wrong for a very long time, it's not going to come right all of a sudden. There's going to be a transition period before it comes right. You've got to allow that amount of time. So in a lot of ways, we as materialists tend to be a little in a hurry. We want everything done now. Because in a sense, that is our nature of thinking that I am the Lord. That's our false ego. Our false ego tells us, I am the Lord. I want to see everything manifest right now. And if you're not manifesting something right now, there's obviously something wrong about you. Let me take charge. And then if I take charge, I mess up everything anyway. You see what I'm saying? So really, in essence, basically what's happened is Prabhupada knew what he was doing when he set up the GBC, who he appointed into the GBC, etc. Yes, there's some fall downs, this, that, and the other. That's part of the program. Welcome to the material world. It's going to happen. But the point is that if we can make these things gradually, as we rise in our consciousness to higher levels, as Rampada Maharaj was saying, that's my approach, is that we should actually have those who are most spiritually advanced applying the intelligence, as opposed to less spiritually advanced people applying the intelligence. So in that example that you gave, the idea is that what is ISKCON management about? It is actually about spirituality. It's about religious life. It's about transcendental life. So you want transcendentalists to be involved, even though they may be in a position to be able to do other things as well, which are of great value, which is preaching. Preaching is the most value. Preaching is the essence, actually. So it's of most value. But then managing of preaching is also preaching. It is not preaching. We have to understand that. That in fact, in a lot of ways, like, again, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said to me, he said, if you want to really make advancement in Krishna consciousness, become a manager in ISKCON. Because when you become a manager in ISKCON, you'll learn fast. Why? Because everybody will make you learn very fast. You'll have no choice. You know, people will be on you. And you'll have to stand up to the test and be able to do things properly. So that's because our management is about transcendental Krishna consciousness. It's about Krishna consciousness being transcendental. So in that sense, that is the experience that we've seen. But over a period of time, he did expect that we will chalk out systems by organization and intelligence, come out with the programs that are going to work a little more dichotomously, you know, as opposed to now it's a little more collegial. It's very homogeneous, collegial type situation is developing right now. But over a period of time, we'll be able to separate and say, okay, here are people who can do things like this. But as I see it, even in the future, the GBC will need to continue to be the spiritual authorities. They will need to be. If they don't, then unfortunately what will happen is you will have somebody else as a spiritual authority, and now we are not in Srila Prabhupada's system. We're in some other system. We would have stepped out of the program that Prabhupada gave us. So from a GBC point of view, I think the GBC are spiritual leaders. That they're managing is because they're managing spirituality. They're managing spiritual program. And they're spiritual leaders who are managing spiritual program. Now we might say that I can point out someone as being not very spiritually advanced and they're in the GBC. I think that's just our false ego speaking. Honestly speaking, I mean, if someone has been empowered by Srila Prabhupada, that empowerment comes, that instruction comes with a lot of empowerment. And collectively, there is brilliant empowerment. And actually, it's testimony to how ISKCON has survived all the attacks that it has survived. It's testimony to the fact that Prabhupada's system is actually working. It is actually working. Thank you. With Bhadranath Swami first.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Then okay, go ahead.
Sorry, just only because it fits into the sequence. Two things. There's a GBC paper. It's called Carrying Out Srila Prabhupada's Order. It gives the history, invocation, scope about the GBC. In there is an in-depth discussion about this point. If you check with me, you can check with me and I'll send you a copy of the paper. It's a GBC position paper. In addition to that, an interesting thing is that the GBC over the last few years has gone through all the different instructions by Srila Prabhupada, what he wanted the GBC to do. So just like we gathered all that information and put it into one big mix, and then laid out the different points. And you will find, in addition, I mean, anyway, I don't want to take up too much time because we don't have much time left. There are many, many core instructions from Srila Prabhupada that the GBC is meant to be inspirational, is meant to preach, is meant to set by example, is meant to be deep philosophers. So we have a service description or job description given to us by Srila Prabhupada, and he does not relegate his GBC members to simply being, you know, expert bureaucrats, not by any means. So there's that side of it. The other thing is, having been a GBC member since 1987, it would be very good to have someone sit in on those GBC meetings. I think we invite guests and stuff like that, and see how it actually works. Because you have a mix of all different types of personalities, and it is the combination that, you know, someone's expert in this field, someone's got expert in this field, someone has realization about this, someone has realization. But each one is an element, but not the full package. It is the combination. Prabhupada told us one time, he said, just like the Pandavas, individually they could have been defeated, combined together they were successful. And each of them brought something different, I'm paraphrasing, brought something different to the combination. So similarly, if you watch the GBC actually work, it is that genius of the combination of each with their own skills that actually brings you to the best result. But Prabhupada's definition was not simply managerial. It was actually primarily inspirational and philosophical. Now I have a question. My question is this, just in the duty of contrarian and to churn the conversation. The example of the pianist, and telling him, hey, give up your pianist and, your career and join the Brahmacharya ashram. Better, play piano for Krishna, do this for Krishna, do that for Krishna. Great. How will that not drain the Brahmacharya ashram? Hey, I should have stayed in college. Hey, I should have kept playing music. Hey, I was pretty good at basketball. I should have stayed in basketball. I should have basketball for Krishna, piano for Krishna. No problem. What happens to the Brahmacharya ashram? Srila Bhakti said, I'm just to turn the conversation. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would get big scholars, and they would want to write a book, they'd want to translate, they want to do so many things. He'd say, put them in the pot department. He had them wash pots. Because Trinadapi Sunichena, and from that all knowledge and advancement comes. So I'm just wondering about the other side.
I just wanted to answer that.
Yeah, I think so. It's good.
I want to add to that because that was exactly the question I was going to ask. Because I was recently talking to Satyanarayan Prabhu, and he told me that he had prepared himself academically to become a doctor. And when he joined the movement, he still had a strong desire to become a doctor. So he said he went to Prabhupada. First time he started to ask the question, and Prabhupada just waved his hand and said, get out of here, because he was getting a massage. Prabhupada was getting a massage at the time. And then he got another opportunity to come to Prabhupada's room in Vrindavan, and he started asking the question, but he framed it in such a way that he thought Prabhupada would accept his proposal by saying, yeah, he said, I want to become an Ayurvedic doctor. And Prabhupada said, there are so many doctors in the world, and people are still dying. And he said, become a spiritual doctor and just deal with my books. And he walked away, and now for the rest of his life, he's been with the BBT and dedicated his life in that. So my question was along the same lines. Where is the line? What is the discrimination when you look at somebody and say, the pianist, keep playing, Prabhupada told George Harrison, keep playing, like that.
Well, another example is Rabindra Prabhu, who was in his PhD program. And as he explains the story, he said every single devotee in the movement that he knew told him, stop, it's Maya, don't pursue your degree, except one. And the one just happened to be Srila Prabhupada, who told him, no, you should continue, you should get your PhD, very important for the movement. And Rabindra Prabhu explains that when he told the other devotees, they still said he should give it up because they said, Prabhupada only told you that because you're attached. And he said, all right, well, maybe that's my problem, but either way, that's the order given to me by my spiritual master, so I'm going to follow him instead of your interpretation of that. So, it's a subtle thing. I think it depends on the situation, and I think all aspects are there. I tend to think that we should be figuring out how to have Brahmacharya ashram be such an attractive thing that so many young men and women want to enter Brahmacharya ashram. Also with the understanding that the vast majority of young men and women will leave the Brahmacharya ashram. Some will stay Brahmacharis for life, some will take sannyas, but the majority are going to become married. And you think of like an example, it's kind of a pseudo Brahmacharya ashram, but I think the count now is up to 70,000 Mormon missionaries on the street today, knocking on doors. 70,000 young men and women who've been raised in a culture that when I'm 18, before I go to college, I'm going to go out and live a celibate life and only call my mother on Christmas Day and live in an ashram with another guy and ride bicycles and knock on doors and talk to people about my scripture and my faith. And we don't have, wouldn't it be, just imagine today if every young man and woman in our communities was so inspired to give just 2 years as a brahmachari. I'm not saying that's the model we have to do, but I think it's, there's some cultural growth that has to be there. And that ideally, I lived for 10 years as a brahmachari, I wouldn't give up a minute of it. I think it's a fantastic experience and everyone should have it. And we need to figure out how to do it in a mature way that people understand that most people, brahmachari 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever, it's not going to be lifelong dedication to brahmachari ashram, but hopefully the brahmachari lifestyle and the values that they learn at that stage. So I think we got more work to do. And we used to only emphasize brahmacharis, and grastas felt discriminated against. These days it's kind of like the other way, like there's so many people in white, and you get a brahmachari, it's like, it's frosting on the cake. Wow, we got one. You know, the whole temple can be inspired. Look, saffron. You know, that shouldn't be there either. You know, we desperately need more brahmacharis, and that needs to be emphasized.
Actually, I think the question itself. The question itself is proof of this principle of Yukta Vairagya, that even material things can be used, everything can be used in Krishna's service. And Varnashrama can be used in Krishna's service as well. The idea is that when we speak about, somebody being a pianist or, a football player or whatever else they might be, we're talking about Varnas. That's not ashrama. And so the idea is that everybody has to go through this idea of being brahmacharis at some stage, then to grihastha, then to vanaprastha and sannyas. Those are the natural stages of life. So we can see how Varnashram can be applied, which is that pretty much everybody should go through the brahmachari system because they are brahmacharis. I mean, if you're going to skip that system, then you're going to have problems, because that's just natural order of things. So in that sense, I don't think we'll have a shortage of brahmacharis because of the fact that somebody may have an inclination to do one type of activity or another. That inclination can be used in Krishna's service in some way, shape, form or another. But immediately they should get some training. The first thing is they should get some training. And what brahmacharya provides is training. It's actually a training ground. And so then, how do we actually then assign what type of work that somebody should do? And that's where this Bhagavad Gita verse, Tadvidi Pranipatena, comes in, that we need to have a spiritual master, and spiritual master can direct a disciple and say that you need to do this. And when the spiritual master directs the disciple, that disciple is going to be a very successful person. Much more successful than if they had bucked that system and gone to the material system of, I will decide what I'd like to do, thank you very much. I have my affinities, my desires, and I'm going to pursue them because that's the American dream, or the Fijian dream, or the Chinese dream, or the Timbuktu dream, or whatever else dream it is. I mean, that's how I'm going to pursue things. That's not the way. For us, the answer is really Tadvidi Pranipatena Pariprashnena Sevaya. And this is why really we are a movement of spiritual masters, that everybody must become trained up to be able to reach out to people and engage them according to their service and bring them through, clearly understand ourselves, what is our program, and then introduce them through that program. In fact, we'll be overflowing with brahmacharis if we follow our program. The fact is that we are learning right now. We're not completely have become complete experts. But when we do become experts, there'll be no shortage of brahmacharis actually, and there'll be no shortage of grihasthas, no shortage of vanaprasthas, no shortage of sannyasis. It's going to be in the system. Sorry?
According to your prediction of it.
Yeah. Okay.
And in honor of the brahmacharya
I
ashram,
think we still have a shortage of grihasthas. Because really, are we grihasthas? That's a big question.
in honor
I
of
would
the
ask that question. Are we really grihasthas?
in honor of the brahmacharya ashram, because everyone knows one of the key religious principles of brahmacharya ashram is honoring prasadam. So we'll stop here and honor prasadam. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nice to share this.
Just a reminder, we'll start the meeting exactly at 9:30 sharp.